Terrific. Thank you. I really look forward to this. I'm delighted you made the time.
Yeah, thank you.
We make this a reality today. Tell me a little bit about your mom and dad.
Well, my dad, of course, was a banker. He worked at the old Bank of Jamestown, which is now Key Bank. Dad graduated from high school in 1925, which was right in the era of Babe Ruth. So I think he was a baseball fan even from that period of time. He used to talk about going to excursions. During those days, they had a lot of excursions where you could go up to Westfield and jump on the train, New York Central, and go down to Terminal Tower, and then either take a streetcar out to League Park, or you could try to walk down to the stadium on the lake. But the two things that Dad always talked about, and this is before 1941 now, the two things that Dad always told me, he said, I saw Babe Ruth hit his 500th home run at League Park, and he said, I was at the first regular season Cleveland Indians game at Municipal Stadium in 1932. So I always remember that. So I went to see David one time down in Washington when he was living down in that area, and he took me to Camden Yards to see the Indians play because they happened to be in town. So on the way up, I said, David, I want to go to the Babe Ruth Museum, which is like right around the corner from Camden Yards. So we got up there a little early and found the museum, and we walked in, I remember, and there was a guy at the counter, and I told him this story about my dad, and he said, well, if you go in the next room, up on the wall, we have every home run that the Babe ever hit from 1 to 714 on little plaques. And he said, on the plaque is the date, the pitcher's name, and where it was hit. So David and I walked in to the room and found number 500, sure enough, August 11th, 1929, League Park. The pitcher was Willis Hudlin. So I knew Dad was there. Dad had to be there. He told us about that. So, well, then I did a lot of reading about the old Indians and how they were trying to build that. Cleveland wanted to build that stadium in the 20s to attract the Olympics. Well, they got into some political problems, and the thing never got built until the early 30s, and it wasn't ready to go until 1932. They had a few exhibition games there, but the first regular season game there was July 31st, 1932. And Dad said, I remember being there because I saw Lefty Grove pitch against Mel Harder. He said Lefty Grove was the best pitcher I ever saw. It was I think the Indians got beat 1-0, I believe. The thing that's interesting about that is Dad was at the first game. I was at the last game in 1993. I sat in the stands and saw them bring Bob Hope out on a golf cart to say goodbye to the stadium. So I can imagine that by 1941, Dad was really into it. He was looking forward to baseball, being in Jamestown.
This is for your family. Talk about your mother a little bit too.
Well, Mom was a fair bit younger than Dad. She was 7 or 8 years younger than Dad, and she grew up in Pennsylvania. She was born in Leeper, Pennsylvania. And she ended up in Jamestown through her father died when she was very young. She was the youngest of 6 kids. Her mother married again, and her stepfather moved around a lot. This was during the Depression. So they lived in Erie. They lived a couple other places. Then they ended up moving back to Jamestown, and they lived on Utica Street. Well, then Mom got a job when she graduated from high school in 1935. She got a job with the telephone company. And she used to do her banking down at the Bank of Jamestown. So at that time, Dad was, Dad would have been about 28 or something like that. He was a teller. And she used to go into the bank and she would do her business with him. And, finally, by 1940, he actually asked her out and they went on a date. Well, then she, over those years, they used to go to a lot of ball games. Because I remember when he went into the Army in 1942, they would write back and forth. You remember, Rick, they had those letters in the basement. I don't know whether you still have any of them. You still got them. Well, I remember reading a couple of them, and Mom would say, I was down at the stadium last night and saw Lyle Parkhurst pitch, and the Falcons won, whatever it was. So they would go back and forth like that. Yeah.
So your dad's a banker.
Right.
Your dad's in pursuit of your mother-to-be in
Right.
1940. We read through, this is the 85th anniversary
Right.
of that, and if you don't
Sure.
have
No, I've got it. Yeah.
got it. And of course, 1940, we don't have a team for a period of
Right.
time. Niagara Falls, they work a deal with Harry Bisgeier.
Harry Bisgeier to come to town.
And the guys who come to, the two main players in this drama are Kessler and Barger.
I think Ernie Kessler, now Dad knew him pretty well, and I think he may have recruited Dad. Actually, he may have recruited Dad, because I know later, when in the late 50s, when the Tigers left and then the Pirates came for that one year, and then the Tigers came back, Dad was part when they formed Jamestown Furniture City Baseball. Dad was part of that. I know he was the treasurer. He bought me a share of stock, and I wish I had that stock certificate. I don't know what happened to it, Rick. I don't. But I had one share of stock in Jamestown Furniture City Baseball, and I remember we had an ashtray that said Tigers 1963 that Dad got when he was treasurer of the ball club then. So I would imagine back in 1941, it might have been Ernie Kessler that got him involved.
So we see a great picture of your dad selling
Right.
the first ticket to the mayor, Leon Roberts.
Right.
Did you ever really talk about those early days? I mean, this is the beginning.
Yeah.
This is the construction of the facility, which was privately constructed, a little lost in the history. This was not a city.
City
ultimately owned it,
Right.
but they didn't pay for it.
Right. Well, of course, I wasn't born until 1947. So, I don't remember those really early years. I know Dad was active. I know Dad was involved. The thing about is, Dad was in the bank, and if you went in the bank to open an account, he was the one that did it.
Right.
He was the bank operations officer. So he crossed paths with a lot of these people. And I know the earliest that I can remember going to a game, and I thought about this long and hard now, was I was in the third grade, and this would have been about 1956. And and I had a friend named Richard Anderson who lived on, what was the street behind Chapman there that ran parallel with Chapman? Francis Street, yeah. He lived there. And Dad had invited he and his father to go to a game with us. So we went to see the Hamilton Cardinals, which were part of the Pony League then. That was a Cardinal affiliate. That is the earliest game I remember going to. But Dad had been involved, and I don't know in those years. I don't remember how many games he went to. I know the bank had season seats. They were not box seats, but if you remember the stadium, they have 3-4 rows of box seats. Then they have a walkway, and then behind the walkway, the second row, I think, were the bank seats. So they were very good seats, yeah. And they were on the third base side. They weren't right behind home plate. They were kind of on the third base side. So we used to sit there a lot. And
Did you go with your dad?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, we went to a lot of
Father-son
games.
type deal?
Father-son deal.
Yeah.
When I was looking at your roster of people, I just noticed Johnny O'Neill. And I remember Johnny O'Neill very well. He was general manager for a year or two. And my dad was treasurer then. He used to, when we go to the ballpark, he would come sometimes when he'd be there. He'd come up and sit down with us and talk baseball. And one night we were there, I remember this specifically, one night we were there, I'd been reading a lot. I read a lot about baseball, and there was an article that I had read about the 1942 St. Louis Cardinals, what a great ball club they were. The Yankees had been from 36 to 41. They won the pennant every year except one, and they won the World Series. And here these up and coming Cardinals. That was Stan Musial's first full season then. Well, anyway, I know Johnny had played in the National League, and I asked him whether he knew some of these Cardinals. I said, yeah, and I said, there's an outfielder named Terry Moore, and this article that I read said he was a great center fielder. Well, just as we were talking about that, one of the players on the opposite team, I forget who we were playing, hit a ball to the guy who was in a center field. I thought I remembered that it was Jim Rooker, but I don't think it was, because Rooker was probably gone by then. But anyway, the guy misplayed the ball. It went over his head and went to the back. So after the play was over, Johnny O'Neill leans into me and he said, "You see that ball out there?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Terry Moore would have eaten that up." So those are the kinds of things that I remember. You know, we was sitting there.
Put your dad in perspective. I'm not telling you.
Sure, no.
But he was in 1950. Things were kind of in the minor leagues, really fading fast.
Right.
In the late 50s. And 1956, Jerry Lawson.
Okay.
And a person whose name I am Dotage.
Right.
I forget. They made an effort. And within that effort was your dad. He was the treasurer.
Right.
To try to salvage the team because the Tigers had kind of
wanted out.
They just said wanted out.
Right.
We've taken enough lickings, and we don't want to keep ticking here. So Jerry, ex-guy, I know Ernie was the treasurer, because I see his name again.
Sure.
His name shows up again.
Sure.
Again in 56. And that didn't work. And then in 1957, the Pirates
came to town
for half a year. Don Clendenin, New York Mets fame.
Yeah, I was there. I met her. The last game that the Pirates played that year, I went into the clubhouse with Dad. Dad took me in the clubhouse, and there was a pitcher named Elmo Plaskett who ended up going to the Pirates and playing in about 62 or 3. He pitched for the very nice guy. And Dad had met him when he came to town because he came to the bank to open up a bank account. So Dad took me in there, and I got a chance to meet Elmo Plaskett, and I got his autograph and everything. So,
by the way, hang on to that autograph. I happen to know, because I've been trying to find one recently. I'm doing a collection for the Sports Hall of Fame of major leaguers who came through Jamestown. Elmo's one of them. It's a valuable asset.
I don't know whether you have that, David. Do you have that?
That could change your estate planning.
Yeah.
I don't have the.
I don't remember where that is.
Of all the names you happen to mention, I go, wow.
David, I had a bunch of autographs. I had everybody. I had Willie Mays. I had Mantle. I had all the. When David was about 3 years old, he got into my stuff, and I had it in a book, and he didn't realize what he was doing, and some of that stuff ended up.
That's what happens when you give your autograph book to a 30-year-old.
Yeah.
Man, no, you really
He got rid of it.
No accountability, responsibility.
No.
Yeah.
But anyway, I remember that era, and I remember that well. And the other thing I was going to say, I remember, I just happened to think about this. Tony Lupien was manager here, and I remember going to some games to see Tony Lupien. He actually played in a couple games. He was the player manager. And then I read about Tony Lupien. He was a Boston Red Sox player. He played with Ted Williams and those guys. And I remember in that era there, and when the Tigers came back, I remember that era. When we used to go to the ball games.
61, by the way.
Yeah, this is 1961 to about 65.
Right.
That was an era that I remember a lot about. I remember the Tiger. I remember Cy Williams used to come to the game, and he used to scout. He had the same hat. He wore the same hat, sat in the same seat, I remember. Then also, I remember Dad, one night we went into the offices, and Jim Campbell was in there. Jim Campbell at that time was farm director of the Tigers. That was before he was made general manager, so I met him. And so, you know, I met a lot of these guys that they would come through town, and I'll be there. So,
Well, you can elaborate on that. He won, and that was the Al Fedorov man.
Al Fedor, and then Stubby came. Yeah, after that, Stubby Overmeyer. I remember Stubby Overmeyer opened the Little League season one year when he was manager. He came up to up to Bergman Park, and he opened up Little League. He got up to the plate, and they threw him a pitch, and he hit it out in the outfield. But I remember that era. But that was a really good era. That reminds me of a Johnny Newman story. You know, I had met Johnny Newman through my dad. When I was growing up, he was coaching baseball. He was coaching the Eagles in the American Little League, and I was never good enough. When he had tryouts, I was never that great a player, so he didn't pick me. But I know he had 3 of my friends played for him: Ray Fasciano, John Moyer, and Dick Schmonsky. If you remember those guys. Schmonsky's brother Don was a heck of a pitcher. He was signed by the Milwaukee Brewers, I know, and I don't know. I lost track of him. I don't know what's happened to him. But so anyway,
He struck me out a few times.
Did he?
Yeah, Don.
Did he really?
I have
Yeah.
great memories of Don.
But anyway, I ended up playing on the Eagles, but it was after Johnny retired. Milt Lindstrom was our manager then, and he picked me, so I was there for 1 year. But yeah, those guys, I remember. Those guys, some of the players were, you know, they were right around town. A lot of the girls that worked at my dad's bank used to date some of those players because I used to see them around, and you know, so they were, you know, that was a really great era. But the Johnny Newman story I was going to tell you was when I used to sit with him out in the third base bleachers out there, and he would sit there with a cup, put it down a cup, big chaw, and he'd spit into the chaw, and then he would tell baseball stories all night long. One of them, he said, you know, he said, there's a catcher on this team. And he said, he's not ever going to be a great ball player, but he said, he's going to be a great coach or manager. You wait and see. Well, you know who he was talking about? Jim Leyland.
Oh, golly.
Jim Leyland. I've got Jim Leyland's autograph. You don't have...
I don't have any of your autographs.
No, not from the Tigers, that team.
Yeah.
I gave it... I have a grandson who was a ball player.
Aren't you glad you came?
Yeah.
Who would be the foil?
I have a grandson who was a ball player until he decided he wanted to be a priest. So he's studying for the priesthood now, but he got that ball. I gave him that ball that has Jim Leyland's autograph on it. But I was thinking to myself, it's too bad that Johnny didn't live long enough to see Leyland become a manager and go into the Hall of Fame. So
That 1961-65 Tigers time period, you know, had the guys like Jim Rook.
right,
I remember specifically a guy named Mike Holochuk,
yes,
second baseman, who could hit a ton. I mean, had big power, little guy, but he had a lot of tremendous power.
there's a pitcher named Mike Fedak too, if I remember right.
yes.
I remember there was another left-handed pitcher named Bernie Kazakevich. And every time I saw him
We're the
pitch,
only two guys that can communicate like this.
only time I could ever think about, he'd get on the mound and he'd just, you know, turn around and he'd get some rosin, and he never was, you know, he wasn't ever quick. And I remember reading a story about the Yankees, about Tommy Byrne. Tommy Byrne was that way too, as a lefty until Dan Topping told George Weiss to get to get rid of him because he was tired. But that's the way he was. That's the way these guys were.
Well, Jim Rooker, I mean, it's a great story because here he was just a center fielder.
And he wasn't a very good one either, I don't
But
think.
he had a rifle of an arm.
Rifle of an arm.
Remembered that, and so they converted him to a pitcher.
Right.
He became a major league pitcher of some renown.
And then he became a broadcaster with the Pittsburgh Pirates later on. I remember his wife. His wife used to come to every game, and she would sit near us, and she had a baby. She would bring the baby, and they would be at every. She'd be at every game, practically. So.
I want to make sure this continues to be your interview, not mine.
No, that's okay.
In fact, reflection, there was a lady, because I remember this so distinctly, and I think her name was Irma, and that may have been just somebody who gave her the name, who was just dolled up tremendously, had the low-cut dress, everything, and I think it's probably from Irma LaDouce. Somebody, my dad may have said that.
Could be.
It was like, there's Irma over there, but I remember she'd come to the games, and we very young kids were kind of
well, there was
awed by it all. That's the best term I could come to.
The one lady I remember was one that my dad knew. Her name was Annie Larson, and she was an older lady, very, very nice lady, very, very refined and stuff. And she was a huge fan. She was at every game, and Dad used to see, because I think she did her banking at the bank too. So that's how Dad knew her. But she used to go up to Allen Park every morning during the summer and have coffee up there. And then she'd be at all the ball games. The other guy I remember, and maybe you know this guy, his name was Larry. He sat up in the stand, he had a loud voice. He worked at Gunnell and Carlson. He worked for Russ Wurtzer.
Slewfoot. His nickname was Slewfoot.
Yeah, Larry, I forget his last name.
Larry
but
Anderson, yeah.
Larry, he had a huge, loud voice. I remember that. He was always up there bellowing. You could always hear him up there.
Again, deja vu all over again. My dad worked at Gunnell and Carlson in the late 40s.
Oh, did he?
50s, yeah. And Larry was one of the guys. And the stories from Gunnell and Carlson's, which was a hotbed of baseball.
Oh, I know. Oh, absolutely.
The ticker tapes and all that stuff.
Yeah. My dad used to stop there every Sunday. We'd come home from church and he'd stop there and get a Sunday paper. And I remember 1954 when the Indians got swept in 4. I remember him stopping that Sunday to get the paper, and he and Russ Wurtzer, I think, and maybe Larry were talking, and I asked him, I said, how did the Indians get beat? How can they get beat? And they said, we don't know how they got beat, but they did. Now, one of the first things I remember when we got our first television, the first thing we had on the television was the 1954 World Series. We turned it on. Mike Garcia was pitching at the Polo Grounds.
And Dusty Rhodes
hit those home runs.
They were 250 feet.
250 feet, right down the line. Yeah. Oh, I know.
The 61 through 65, and then do you remember, David? The Tigers left in a huff in 65.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they had a lousy team.
Right.
Leland was part of that.
Right.
And I had a privilege of interviewing Jim in Erie last year.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, about that 65 team.
Yeah.
And how cold it was, and there's some crazy stories.
Right.
But ultimately, Campbell.
Yeah.
Jim Campbell was torqued at Jamestown. Jamestown was torqued at the Tigers, and then the hell with you.
Well, that was a period too, what I find kind of interesting, because I remember we had some real good prospects. Jack DeLauro.
Sure.
I remember meeting Jack DeLauro. He is another guy that I think stopped in the bank, and my dad met him, so he introduced him to me at the game. We were talking to him. They had a catcher named Don Bryant, who ended up playing for the Cubs, I think, later on. But the thing that, to me, that was very interesting was when I moved to Massillon and I started my practice, one of my best friends ran the newspaper in that town. He was the publisher of the newspaper, and he was a big Tiger fan. So he and I go back and forth. He took me up to Detroit, to the old stadium and to the new stadium, and we go back and forth. He introduced me to Sparky Anderson. He introduced me to Ernie Harwell. But the thing that we talked about was that was the era where the Tigers were really putting together that great ball club that won the World Series in 1968 with Mickey Lolich. And the one guy that I got to see was Joe Sparma. If you know who Joe Sparma is, he was a Maslin guy. 1968, when I was a student at Mount Union, he came to campus campaigning for a congressman that was running against the local guy. And I remember him. He came in the campus center. He had white shoes on. He had a big smile. He was shaking everybody's hand. It was right after he was in the World Series, right after he pitched in the World Series that year. But no, that was the period where the Tigers, they got Denny McLean, John Hiller, who I remember from playing, Jack DeLauro, but Jack ended up going to the Mets, I know, finally. So
69 Mets, too.
69 Mets. I remember the All-Star game. Maybe you were at the one year in about 65, or maybe it was even later when, it had to be in that era. They had the NYP All-Star game. Jerry Koosman pitched, I remember. I remember Cleon Jones and Ed Kranepool played in that game. I remember them, but they're with the Mets. Then I remember Wellsville, had the Red Sox team. And I remember George Scott. I remember Mike Andrews. And Joe Foy was then in the Red Sox organization, but remember then he ended up going to the Mets finally. But then I remember, I just got it.
Serious memory here, by the way. Serious memory.
For Christmas, my son-in-law gave me Pete Rose's new book about Charlie Hustle, and I was reading in there that Rose played for Geneva in 1961. He played for Geneva, so I went back and looked and I didn't see him on the roster there or anything, but I remember Antonio Perez was the batting champion that year. Tony Perez, yeah.
I'd have to check. He did play. No question. Pete Rose played at Geneva. I'm not sure it wasn't 1960.
Maybe it was 60.
We're not in the league.
That could very well be. That's why I don't remember him.
I
Yeah.
looked long and hard.
Yeah.
And Pete Rose came to Jamestown for the Temple Hesed Abraham, and I was trying to connect the dots, and I couldn't then. And subsequently, Tony Perez was here, and I did interview him about coming here.
Sure. But I remember, speaking of that group, Temple Hesed Abraham, Dad's Bank was one of the sponsors of that, and of course, when I was younger, Dad didn't want to take me because they had to, it was for adults really. So, but when I was a junior in high school, he decided, I'm going to let you go with me because he got the tickets to go to their. Remember, they had a cocktail party first, and then they had the thing. So I went with him, and my eyes were like this, even at a cocktail party. I was wandering around, and I remember Max Robinson was there, and he was greeting all these guys, and I remember Bill Veck was there, and we tried to go up and talk to him, but he was kind of out of it at that time. But I did talk to Dean Chance. If you remember Dean Chance, that year he had won the he won the Cy Young that year in the American League. So I asked him, I said, Dean, how do you pitch to Rocky Colavito? Because that was my favorite player. And Dean said, you got to throw the ball right here. He said he has a blind spot that he can't. If I can get my fastball right there, he can't touch it. So I said, how do you pitch to Mickey Mantle? He said, Mantle bats left-handed against me, and he said Mantle's got a bad right knee. His knee now is so bad that he can't turn on it anymore. So if I can get my fastball down and in, he can't turn on that. He said, that's how I pitch. So I said, how do you throw your curveball? And he did this. He said, put a lot of spin on it. A lot of spin. But
What a throw. You and I were at that dinner together.
Yes.
We just didn't know.
Yeah, you're right. I remember, I think it was maybe the year before, they had Jim Brown was there, and the Optimist Club had their meetings on Wednesday, and my dad was an optimist, and they had a father-son day, and they invited Jim Brown. He ended up staying overnight, and down at the old hotel, and I remember sitting there and watching Jim Brown come in a three-piece suit, come sauntering in, and sat down, and he was very articulate. I was surprised. I didn't think he'd be that articulate, but he was very articulate, and he was very friendly. And but yeah, those were pretty good. Dick Stewart was at that one too. Dr. Strangeglove.
My hero. My dad, we were Pirate fans.
Oh, were you Pirate fans?
Yeah, and my dad hated him because he was only a home run. He could hit home runs, but he could strike out, and he could make a lot of errors. Added no value to the team other than that.
Well, where we used to live on Adams Street, our neighbor next door, Erickson, Jeff Erickson, was a big Pirates fan. Across the street, some people, Henneman was their name. They were from Du Bois, Pennsylvania, and they were Pirate fans. So during the summer, when there was no air conditioning, of course, they would have we'd have Bob Prince and Jim Woods. They would be listening to him. But then Jeff's father was a Yankees fan, so we'd have the Yankees. Even though he was a Pirates fan, his father was a Yankees. We'd have the Yankees on with Mel Allen, and we used to listen to Jimmy Dudley. So we had three of these in our neighborhood all summer.
You made notes.
Yes.
I want to make sure you tell us what those notes say.
Okay. Well, Dad liked to go, to these excursions, and after I was born and Rick was born, he couldn't do that anymore so much. But, however, a couple times, one year our mother got pretty sick, and she was in the hospital, and he wanted to do something for her. She wanted to go to Florida, so they went to Florida. This was about 1961 or so, and they had somebody come and stay with us. Well, Dad decided he knew that the Orioles had spring training down there. So he went, and Dad was a banker. He always wore a sport coat, I think, whenever he went someplace. So he had a sport coat on, and he had his sunglasses, and he got seats for one of these Orioles exhibition games right on the field practically. So he was sitting there, and he said all of a sudden all these Orioles came up to him and said, "Hello, how you doing?" And he had a baseball that we signed, which I think you have the baseball. Yeah, you got the Orioles with all the Orioles on it. And here he finally found out that they thought he was one of the Orioles management, that he was part of the management. So he got to do that. Then he went to a bankers conference in New York about 2 or 3 years later maybe, and they stayed at the Biltmore Hotel. Well, after the conference was over, he went out into the lobby, and all these ball players here, the Chicago White Sox, were staying there. So he looked around, and here he saw Nellie Fox. He recognized Fox, so he just walked up to Nellie Fox and introduced himself, said he was from Jamestown, and "Oh, Jamestown, I really enjoyed my time there," and they were going. So he said, Louis Aparicio walked up to them, and they were talking, and Dad told him how that when he first knew Nellie, he said, you're a lot older than you told me you were, Nellie. So, but he got all those autographs too. That was a good time.
Nellie Fox, just for the record, was a center fielder here.
Yeah, that's right. He was not an infielder. Johnny O'Neill and my dad became pretty good friends, and I told Dad I wanted to go to Pittsburgh to Forbes Field because I had never been to Forbes Field. So he talked to Johnny O'Neill, and Johnny knew Joe Brown, who was the general manager of the Pirates. So he called Joe Brown and got us some seats. Well, lo and behold, the tickets we got were for the Giants. They were playing the Giants. We went down and stayed overnight in the same hotel that the Giants were in, and we had seats literally right beside the dugout, right beside the Giants' dugout. So we got down there on Saturday. This was a Saturday game. We got down there, and Joe Garagiola was doing the game of the week, and he was interviewing Alvin Dark. So we got to sit there right in front of us. He was interviewing Alvin Dark. They were talking about this and that. So afterwards, Dad got his attention, and he came up and talked to us. And I got his autograph, and he asked us where we were from, and we told him, and he was very nice. He was very nice. Well, then that next morning, we stayed overnight. I decided, this was a Sunday morning, I wanted to get some Giants autographs, because the night before, we had taken the streetcar up to Lamont's and had dinner. And we came back, and as we were coming into the hotel, all these Giants were coming in. Orlando Cepeda, Juan Marichal, the guys who I recognized. Well, I didn't have anything to get their autograph with, so I thought the next morning I'm going to come down and see how many I can get. So we came down the next morning, and there was 2 or 3 other kids, and we were just standing there. Willie Mays comes out off the elevator. He had a gray sharkskin suit on. I'll never forget that. And he wasn't that big. I was surprised. He was not big at all. And we went up to him, this kid and I, and he signed our autographs. He was very nice, and then he went on his way. Well, then I was looking around, and I saw in the coffee shop, Willie McCovey was sitting on the counter in the coffee shop. So I thought, I'll go in there. So I went in there. And I went up to him, Miss McCovey, how are you? Could I have your autograph? Sure. So he quit eating and gave me his autograph. The day before, he had been hit by a pitch, and I know and since we had those close seats, I could see he really got hit hard. So while he was signing, I asked him, I said, Willie, how's your arm? Oh, not bad. And he picked his arm up. His forearm and his hands, I've never seen bigger hands. I mean, they were huge. So, well, then we decided we were going to go upstairs to see if we could get any of the Giants coming out of their hotel room. So we went up there, and we were in the lobby, and lo and behold, I turn around, there's Duke Snider. And that was the year that that was his last year. He was with the Giants. And we asked for his autograph, and he signed it, and he said, now, boys, be very quiet up here. I don't want you to make any noise now. Oh, no, we won't. So, and I forget who else I got that day, but that was one of the trips that we had made.
Pretty big names here, Dave.
Yeah, well, I got a better one yet. My dad, Merrill Lynch, did all the bank's investment work. So Dad got to know the guy, the partner in the local office here. So he said he gave us, Merrill Lynch had tickets right behind the broadcast booth at old Municipal Stadium. So we went up there for one game. They were playing, they're playing the Yankees that game, but there was another Yankees game I'll tell you about. But anyway, we got our seats, and we were literally right in back of Dizzy Dean and Pee Wee Reese doing the game of the week. So I had a baseball that I had bought to get autographs. So I leaned over and I got Pee Wee's attention. I said, Pee Wee, would you sign this? He never said a word. He signed it. And I said, could you give it to Dizzy? So he turned one on and he gave it to Dizzy. And Dizzy signed it and he gave it back to me. I said, thank you, Mr. Dean. He said, okay, partner. Well, then another Yankees game.
That's great.
We got that we didn't get the Banks tickets. But the Indians were playing the Yankees, and this was like 1960, I think, if I remember, or maybe 61. But anyway, we went, and Dad knew his way around Cleveland a lot because he'd been there on a lot of excursions, and he knew everything. So we stayed at the old Sheraton Hotel, and that's where the Yankees were staying. And we had gone. I had two uncles. One of them lived in downtown Cleveland. The other lived in Ravenna. So we called them and we went to dinner with them and so forth. So we were coming back into the hotel, and here the Yankees had just come into town, and all their suitcases were there. And I saw Tony Kubek and Ryan Duran, because I recognized them from their baseball cards. So I went up and I got their autograph. So then we went up to our room. So then that next morning, Dad said, let's go down. He said, there's a cafeteria down on Euclid. We can get down and have brunch, and then we'll just walk to the stadium. So we got out of the room, and we hit the button for the elevator. So the elevator doors open. There's Mickey Mantle and Whitey Ford in this elevator. So Dad and I got on the elevator with him, and I could barely talk. So Dad had a sport coat. He reached in his sport coat, and he had an envelope, and he had a pen. And I said, Mickey, would you sign this? Mickey never said a word. He gave me his autograph. Well, then I turned to Whitey Ford, and by that time the elevator was down at the lobby, and the doors opened, and there were kids, Mickey Mantle, Whitey Ford. And Ford said, get out of the way, kids. We got to go to the ballpark. So I never did get Ford's autograph.
Well,
But
of the two, you got the bigger one.
yeah, but that's one of the ones that I think got destroyed that time.
Clearly is your estate planning.
I have a memory about how they got destroyed too. He had an office in the basement of his house. We lived at in Canton, and there was a little bookshelf, and the autograph book was on the shelf.
That's
He
right.
was doing work, and I asked him, I said, I picked up the book, and it had a bunch of colored pages in it.
That's right,
I was
yeah.
3 or 4. And I said, can I have this? And he said, yeah. So I started ripping out the pages that had stuff written on them, because I was the pages that didn't have it. And then he was like sitting right there. So every time he tells that story, I'm like, don't give your autograph book to the 3 or 4-year-old.
Well, it's funny. I have an autograph book similarly.
Yeah.
Every other page is colored.
Yep.
It's a different colored pages. And
That's right.
The autographs that are in that I still do have, that I will not give to even my 40-year-old,
Son, yeah.
is in fact that 1960s Hot Temple Has It Abraham book. So the guys that he just talked about.
Yep.
So when you come to my office someday, you can
Yeah, that's right.
reminisce.
One thing I remember, too, about this was in the 60s, I think, and maybe you remember this, Greg, too. Lefty Gomez came to Jamestown. He was with Wilson Sporting Goods, and they played against an all-star team of Babe Ruth League guys, I think, because I think the guy that pitched was a guy named Steve Maggio, if you know Steve Maggio. He was pitching. Well, Gomez, I remember, he got up and got a base hit, and it was really one of those good games. Well, when I got to Massillon now, this friend of mine, his name was David Schultz, who was the big Tiger fan. He also knew Tommy Henrik from the Incas. Tommy Henrik's from Massillon. So anyway, he introduced me to Tommy Henrik. So I asked Tommy, I said, I remember seeing Lefty Gomez come to Jamestown and with Wilson Sporting Goods. Well, he said, Gomez liked money. He said, I'm not surprised. That's all he ever thought about. So.
Well, it's funny you should mention that. Lefty Gomez did play the All-Stars, Babe Ruth All-Stars, and my neighbor up the street, guy named Scott Johnson's his name.
Okay.
And big guy. And Lefty pitched an inning. Just
I remember that. Yeah, I remember that.
Scott,
I remember that.
Scott hit a home run. And the greatest hero ever to hit a home run off of Lefty Gomez, of course, he was just lobbing him up there.
Oh, yeah. Now,
I hadn't thought about that in 50 years.
You remember the King in his court?
Eddie Feiner.
Eddie Feiner?
Yeah.
I was at that game when in the stadium when they played. Jim Adamczak pitched. It was a softball. Jim Adamczak was a great guy. He pitched, and I remember that somebody on one of the Jamestown All-Stars hit one and they did score a couple of runs. I remember that game because the King of the Score only had 5 guys, I think, or 4 guys. Yeah. So, but those are always fun. Those were.
Gosh, you're living history there, David.
Well, I got a bunch. Johnny Newman. We got to talk about Johnny Newman again. Johnny was very kind to me. We used to sit and talk baseball. His son Jeff was young then. Jeff must have been 8 or 9 years old, something like that. So I used to kind of play with Jeff because I was in high school, and then in college I was always kind to Jeff, and but anyway, Johnny said, he's tell you what, he said, if you come up to my house and bring me a 6-pack of beer, he said, I've got a bat for you. Oh, really? So I remember Johnny lived on South Main Street. I think he had a house up on the hill on South Main Street there. So I went up there and we sat on his porch, and if I remember, his wife worked nights, so he was always there with he was always babysitting for Jeff. And so he starts telling me stories. He says, he said, I broke in to baseball in 1935 in Terre Haute, Indiana. He said, in the old 3I League. And he said, back in those days when we traveled from town to town, we stayed in these little hotels that really were nothing. He said they had very small rooms. They only had one bathroom, and it was usually at the end of the hall. So he said what they do at night, they had a chamber pot. And you could take the chamber pot, fill it with water, you take it to your room, and you put it under the bed. So if you had to relieve yourself at night, you didn't have to go all the way down the hall. So he said, my roommate was a guy named Dizzy Trout. He was just off the farm. He said he said, I grew up in Chicago, in the inner city. He said, I'd never met anybody like Trout. And he said, Trout was one of these guys. He was up at the crack of dawn, and he'd be in bed as soon as the sun went down. When he said, I like to party a little bit. He said, so one night, he said, I was out, and he said, came back to the hotel, and it was dark. It was late at night. He said, I came in the room. He said, Trout was in bed already, and they had just one bed, and they had to sleep in the same bed. So he said, Trout was already in bed, and he said, so I got in there, and he said, I got my clothes off, and he said, didn't realize really maybe what was going on. So he said, I got into bed. All of a sudden, this smell hit me. And he said, I couldn't believe it. He said, I jumped out of bed, turned on the light, pulled out the chamber pot, opened it up, and here Trout had taken a dump in the chamber pot. And he said, I went nuts, and Trout woke up, and he said, after that, Trout and I were never friends. He said, after Trout made it big, he pitched in the 1945 World Series. He said he ended up, and then, he was later on, Trout was a broadcaster for the Tigers. He said he ended up calling me a couple times and inviting me to see him pitch or inviting me to Detroit. He said, I didn't want to have anything to do with him. Not at all. Didn't want to have anything to do with him. Well, then he also told me a story about Hornell beer. He said, and I had never heard of Hornell beer. When he said, when we played Hornell one time, he said, we all went to, he said, we made a big mistake. Before the game, we went to the brewery and we drank the brewery dry. So he said, by game time, we were all feeling no pain. So he said, the mayor of Hornell was a big fan, and he sat on the third baseline, and he was jawing at us all game, just yelling at us. And so he said, come the late innings, he said, I didn't start the game because I wasn't in that good a shape, but he said they put me into pinch hit. He said, lo and behold, I hit a home run. Drove in two or three runs. He said, I got around the base, and he said, when I got to third base, I could see the mayor was just jumping around, and so I thumbed my nose at him coming around the base. But he had all kinds of stories like that. I met Jerry Klein too, who used to drive the bus. He had some good stories too. He had a story about, I forget where they were playing, but it was Wellsville or maybe it was Hornell. And they were coming back, and Jerry was always, he said, I always hated it when they smoked these cigars. He said they'd get on the bus and smoke cigars and drive me nuts. And he said, so we were on our way back to Jamestown, and he said they started smoking the cigar. And they'd already been drinking beer. So he said all of a sudden, of course, they had to relieve themselves. And they come out, Jerry, you got to stop the bus. I'm not stopping. We're going to go all the way through. So he was on old Old Route 17, went down there, and I think he said they got to Salamanca, and there was a stoplight, and so he had to stop the bus. As soon as he stopped, everybody jumped off the bus and relieved themselves right there.
Well, I think it was you or maybe Rick that sent us pictures of colored, or 1950s picture of the bus, the Falcons bus, and it may have been yours.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we've seen that stuff.
Yeah, but yeah, those were, those are some of my recollections, and I think let's see, I think I've covered them all. Oh, I got one more. Ken McGowan. Do you remember Ken McGowan?
Police officer.
Police officer. He was the first baseman in about 1963 or 4 for the Tigers, I think. I remember we had a clinic, baseball clinic sponsored by the Tigers, and they brought Bob Feller to town. Bob Feller at that time must have been 55 or so. He got out on the mound and started throwing, and I thought, my God, what was he like in his heyday, Well, anyway, at that particular time, I was a first baseman, and Ken was showing us how to play first base and stuff. So I remember him, and he was very nice. Well, anyway, we went to Florida here about 10, 15 years ago, went with my daughter and her husband. We were staying down in Sarasota, and I knew the Pirates trained in Bradenton, and I told my son-in-law, who's also a big fan, I said, let's go up to see the Pirates training camp up there. I want to see if we can go to a ball game because they have a minor league team there. So we went up there and parked, and we had the 2 older boys with us. We had Luke and Noah with us. So we went in the stadium, and as I was paying my fare, I told the lady in the booth, I said, this stadium looks just like my hometown stadium. She said, where are you from? I said, Jamestown, New York. Oh, you are? And she said, you see that guy over there? That's Ken McGowan. He's over there working for us. So,
No kidding.
so I went over there and I introduced myself. I said, you don't remember me, I'm sure, but I told him about the baseball. Oh yeah, he said, I know. He said, yeah. He said, I was a cop there. He said, I remember. He said, we decided to retire down here. So he said, I've been down here, and he said, I come and work here, and I just have a real blast.
That's amazing.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
Check your list. Look
See if I have any more to tell you, huh?
serious work on this. Look at that.
Yeah, well, it's been a couple of months, so the people in the museum, one guy that caught my eye was Les James.
Yep.
He was my coach in Babe Ruth League. Les taught me how to play first base. Good guy, helped me with my hitting. And when I made the All-Stars, he was the All-Star. He was one of the All-Star coaches. But anyway, one night when we were playing, we had a game up at Bergman Park, and I was batting against Jim Brunehouse. If you know Jim Brunehouse,
Yep.
he was quarterback for our team when I was a senior. Anyway, Jim Brunehouse threw a ball, and I thought I really hit it well. I thought I hit it over the third baseman's head. So I come chugging down the first baseline, and here Les is there coaching first base, so I round first base, and I go down towards second. I got thrown out by 20 feet. And everybody was, on the other team was jeering and everything, so I had to walk back to the bench. So Les comes up to me, he said, "What are you doing?" He said, "That was only a single." "What are you doing?" So he got on me then. Well, then when we went to Olean, we played the Olean All-Stars in Babe Ruth League, and this was on a Sunday, and we got there and we got behind, and I wasn't starting, so I got a chance to pitch hit in about the 8th inning. There was a man on, and I hit a ball right over the third baseman's head. It dropped in front of the left fielder. So I was on first. We got first and second. The pitcher then walked the next guy, so we had the bases loaded. Up comes Jim Lofgren. I don't know if you know Jim. Jim came up to the plate, and all this time the sky was getting darker and darker and darker, and the umpires saw it, and I know they were hoping that we'd get this game in. So anyway, Jim got down. He had 2 strikes on him. All of a sudden, it opens up and it pours for about 15 or 20 minutes, and it just poured and poured and poured. So after it quit, the umpires decided, since he had 2 strikes on him and he had 2 outs, we're going to finish the game. So I go back out to second base, and I had to jump in between the puddles because the field was so bad. So I'm standing on second base. So the pitcher throws a ball, Lofgren swings, ball game over, swings and misses. And it was not a good pitch. He swung and missed, game over. So we got back in the dugout, and a couple of players said, why did you swing at that, Jim? So Les James piped up, I told him to do that. He said, I wasn't going to come back here next weekend for one lousy strike.
Good old Les.
Good old Les.
Yeah, he was my midget league football coach.
Oh, he was a great guy.
Yeah.
He talked about playing in the minor leagues too. He talked about playing in mining towns. He said he played in one game. He said this field was all dirt. He said they had wires up all over to protect the balls from going out. He said you play in that game. He said those miners were hanging all over that. They were all over you. He said you didn't take a pitch. He said if you had 2 strikes, you swung.
Well, Les James, I'm looking at page 16 of this book.
Yeah.
The Jockeys, the Jamestown Jockeys, year 1, 1939, Celeron, part of the Pirates. In the opening game at Batavia included Doman, right field, Les James, third base, and then goes on to talk about George Goodell, John Pollock, and others who were kind of local.
Johnny Pollock, I remember, his daughter was in my class. Her name was Judy, and his son John played ball. He was a few years younger than us, I think. Yeah, but I remember Johnny coming to games and talking sports with him too, talking baseball.
Dick Schmidt was another guy.
Young Dick Schmidt pitched, I remember too.
And Bob Schmidt would have been my vintage.
Or rather, Bob Schmidt. It wasn't Dick. It was Bob
Frank
Schmidt.
Smirker, he was another guy.
Oh,
that
big,
was in here. Big Frank.
Big Frank. Yeah.
And he was about your age.
He was in my class.
Yeah.
He was in my class. Yeah, I remember Frank. I got a hit off Frank one time too. We were playing up at Allen Park. I remember. This was the old Chautauqua County League, and I forget who he was playing for. And I remember I got a hit off him. That was the only time I ever did.
Well, most people, that's their like getting a hit off Jim Adams Act. It was the same thing.
Oh, that's right, the same thing.
Remember the one hit.
Yeah.
You know, like Smirker, Don Szymanski, those guys.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's get for that. This is again for your family. Let's do a little life arc of you. You graduate what year?
Graduated from high school in 1966.
Okay, and then?
I went to Mount Union, which is now the University of Mount Union. I went there. I went out for the baseball team, and I was on the team. I didn't really play much, but I was on the team. I majored in accounting. I graduated in 1970. I met my wife there. Her father was a professor at Mount Union. He was chairman of the education department. So she was an Alliance girl. We got married in 1970. I passed the CPA exam in 1972. We moved. We first lived in Cleveland when I worked for the old Haskins and Sells. Then I came to Canton and worked for a couple firms there, and then I started my own firm in 1990. And and then I retired here. I sold my practice and then worked for the guys that bought it till about 5 years ago.
This is where again, Canton?
Canton, yeah, Canton, Ohio. My office was in Massillon though, and I really love Massillon. I mean, Massillon has a rich tradition, history. Of course, Massillon has a football tradition, but their baseball was good. They had Joe Sparma, a guy named Mike Hirschberger. You know who Mike Hirschberger was? Where he was from. I got a chance to meet Mike Hirschberger one time. I used to have a client who was a coach, who was he was a youth baseball coach, and he had Joe Sparma and Mike Hirschberger on the same team. And they went to a national tournament and, you know, so forth. So I got a chance to meet them. But
Well, aside from the fact they're just a football powerhouse.
right.
I mean, Massillon, it's kind of synonymous with that and Mount Union, frankly, both of them
Right.
are just
Oh, yeah.
juggernauts.
Mount Union, Larry Karras and Larry was a year behind me. And, I mean, I didn't know Larry real well. I knew him enough to say hi to him, you know, and his son ended up coaching too. His son followed him. His son was in the same class as my wife and her husband. And again, Jay Spitali was there. Jay was he was a place kicker, I think, if I remember right there. And he was in their class, I think. Mike, not Jay Spitali, Jay Sirianni. I'm thinking of Jay Sirianni. Mike Sirianni, I know, before he went to Washington and Jefferson, played at Mount. He played on that first national championship team that they had in '93. And Nick, I know, was Nick. You know, I never really knew Nick because he was so much younger. But I remember when he first got remember he coached the Kansas City Chiefs. He was with the Chiefs. I remember, but.
Well, my Massillon, just a juggernaut. All right, Rick, what's the question I should be asking your older brother? What's the one you want to make sure the family knows about him?
What else he remembers about our dad and the local baseball team?
Yeah, well, as I said, Dad was a big fan. He really enjoyed. I think he enjoyed going to the games. Being at the bank, he enjoyed when these guys would come in the bank and open up accounts and spend some time with him. I think when he was treasurer, that was largely an honorary job. I don't think he ever kept the books or anything like that. He was on board and he was treasurer, but I think he honestly enjoyed that all that time. I remember coming back from Mount in 1967 after my freshman year. I came back that week was opening day at the Falcons or the Tigers then. And I remember the next day in the newspaper, on the front page, they had a picture of the opening day and they had a crowd and they had a picture of me walking in. They couldn't see my face. They got my back and my rear end, but.
Well, if it was a sense, there are many organizations that have always a person who does such a great job keeping track of not only the books, the finances,
Sure.
secretary, but they kind of are there always. Not
Right.
the face people. This in Nick's case, Biz Geyer,
Right.
and who was the owner for a period of time. Before that, you had Barger, you had Kessler.
Right.
But there seems to be Lundquist. Kind of Lundquist is there throughout. So whenever it was necessary, right up to the 50s, I mean, again, Ernie
Sure.
appears in print.
Well, Dad was kind of a low-key guy too. I mean, he was very outgoing, but he didn't really talk about all that. He was just a fan, I think. I think first and foremost he was a fan.
Was Henning Swanson, was he part of that?
Yeah, Henning was president of the bank. Howard Donovan was president when Dad for a number of years, and then he retired, and then Henning became president. This was probably when I was in high school and college. He was president of the bank. He was a big fan too.
For a period of time, a guy named Robert H. Jackson was on the board of that bank. And I have booklets that early booklets that show about this side that big that would show the calendars of kind of a
Sure.
farmer's almanac thing, but
Sure.
nevertheless they'd have the board members.
Oh yeah.
Robert Jackson and Howard Donovan was their path
President.
sort of
Yeah,
across.
that's right.
So it's a small world department.
Well, I guess. I remember one time I had a group of friends that I used to have breakfast with one day a week, and we would go to a restaurant over in Canton, and I remember one of them came up to me. He said, "I got something to show you." He said, and he gave me this was an annual report of the Bank of Jamestown from like 1959 or something. And I about fell off my chair. I said, "Where did you get this?" "Oh," he said, "I'm not going to tell you." And it had Ernest A.R. Lundquist.
Your dad, how long, let's put a timeline on that. How long did your dad, how long did he work and when did he pass away?
Let's see, well, he started in the bank in 1925. He retired, about 72? That's when you were in high school then, right? Junior. Paul Sandberg then came to him. You know Paul Sandberg. Paul then came to him and said, "Ernie, we'd like to have you work down at the store." He had just bought Carnahan's. So Dad really didn't want to retire. He really enjoyed what he did, but the bank had been sold to Bankers Trust at that time, and they told him, "No, you're too old. You're going to have to retire." So he was thrilled when Paul came to him, and he worked in this building for how many years, Rick? Probably 5 or 6 years.
Yeah,
something like that, until the late 70s, until he had that stroke. And but yeah, he really enjoyed that. He really enjoyed that. I know he did.
How about your mother?
Mom was a stay-at-home mom. She was a fan. I remember, as big a fan as she was, the 1960 World Series with the Yankees and the Pirates. Remember the Pirates came from behind and won that on Mazeroski's home run. I was in study hall at Lincoln. Last period of the day, I had study hall, and the study hall teacher was a guy named Fred Plavney. He was a science teacher, and he was kind of a fan too. So he went to the office and he got Shirt one night. Shirt Hardenberg wasn't there then. It was Donnelly was still the principal. He got Donnelly to turn on the intercom in study hall so we could listen to it. So we listened to the game, and if you remember that game, Yogi Berra, I think, hit a home run in the 8th inning to tie the game at 9-9. So I figured. So when the bell rang, I thought, I'm just going to run right home. So we didn't live too far from Lincoln. So I remember running home, coming in the door, and Mom was sitting there in front of the TV. Mazeroski had just hit the home run. So I missed the home run, but Mom was sitting there and just rapt. She was, and of course everybody in Pittsburgh was just going nuts.
So while you were running home, I too was running home from Bush School. I was Bush.
Yeah.
And I got to Hebner Heights grocery store. And I pulled in, I literally walked in to probably buy a pack of baseball card, and it was on the radio. That's when I heard it. And
yeah.
Boom, of course. The guys from Hebner Heights were all good Yankee fans, and they were
I remember learned
a lot of words in Italian.
The 1957 World Series, I remember a little bit too. One of the games with the Yankees and the Brewers. Of course, everybody hated the Yankees. We had an uncle, our Uncle Rudy, who ran the clothing store, was a huge Yankee fan. So we'd go about all the time and talk back and forth, and he'd always tell us, you guys can't win, But anyway, I remember that 1957 World Series. Mom and Dad were watching it. We were watching it, and a guy named Billy Bruton, remember, won one of the games for the Braves against the Yankees. Mom and Dad were there, and they were just going nuts. I mean, they were just, they were just jumping around, and they were just. So Mom was a big fan, although Mom was. Involved in taking care of Rick and I, and Rick in those days was still pretty, still pretty young. But
and your mom lasted till when?
Mom died in 1998, was it? 1998. Yeah. Mom died in '98. But Mom understood baseball. She kept she kept track of the scores and so forth and. But I remember the thing about Parkhurst. I remember Parky was an umpire. I remember I had to hit again when he was an umpire. He and Ross Crisilla. I don't know if you remember Ross Crisilla. Ross Crisilla. One time I was batting and the pitcher, I forget who it was, pitched. He threw one outside and said, "Come on, Ross." I said, "That wasn't a strike." "Oh," he said, "You're full of horse crackers."
Good, that's a good one.
You remember Ski Irick?
Yeah.
He was another umpire.
Chief Catania, I remember.
Chief Catania, yeah.
Chief Catania.
Chief Catania, yeah. I remember him.
This has been bordering on the unbelievable. You're walking down memory lane for me, anyways, because I kind of was walking. I feel like I'm walking in your shadows, not remembering half the stuff until you bring it up. And all of a sudden, bada bing.
If I can get to talk to something else, I'm sitting in front of the jersey of Jim McCusker. Tell you a Jim McCusker story.
Sure.
His brother-in-law, Chuck Sinatra, or his former son-in-law, lived right behind us. So we got it. Dad got a chance. The Jamestown High School band was playing at one of the Browns games, and Dad got some tickets. And Chuck, we talked to Chuck, and he said, you know, my brother-in-law had been with the Eagles on their championship team 1960. He had just left. He had been with the Jets, and then the Browns picked him up. So he said, Dad said, why don't you go with us to Cleveland so we can meet him. So I had never met him. So we went with Chuck. We went out there, and I remember after the game, we found out that the Browns' wives had something that after every game, they went to a local hotel and had a not a cocktail party, but had a brunch or something, you know, where they could all get together, stuff. So we found out where that was. So we went there, and we walked in, and I remember seeing Vince Costello was there, and then when we were trying to figure out where this was, so here comes Lou Groza. So Chuck said to him, he said, hey, can you tell us where we can meet? He said, I'm Jim McCusker's brother-in-law. And Lou said, well, yeah. He said, all right, I'll tell you. So we went and found out where Jim was, and he came out and talked to us, and I got a chance to meet him. But yeah, that was a long time ago.
So we got a guy named Rick Lundquist here.
Yes.
Nice guy. Did you have any of his musical abilities?
Oh, no. Rick had all. I tried to play clarinet once for a year or two. Frank Schmagliola got frustrated with me, and he was just as happy when I quit playing.
Now he's a serious musician.
Oh, I know he is.
And his family is serious.
And he's got a son who's is a serious musician. I understand that Rick said he's going to play at Chautauqua with the Chautauqua Symphony here in another month.
Is that right?
On the 18th of July.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. But no, we had an Uncle George who we didn't really know very, very well. He was a musician. That's where Rick, I think, got all his ability. Yeah.
Well, he ushers us all in, because being Swedish, you know, as you know, whenever we have an event, all of a sudden the big horn shows up, and Rick introduces the meeting.
Oh, I'll bet. All those years, I used to come back, and he would invite us to come back during the summer, and we'd go up to Allen Park and see him lead the municipal band. One time, Rick invited us up, and they played the Ohio State fight song. Not Vince Malaire, his brother Joe. Joe got up and introduced the song, and here Joe had been in the band. Joe had been an Ohio State bandsman. You know, out where I am in Ohio, that's all we think about is Ohio State. Nothing else matters, you know.
The Ohio State.
The Ohio State University. The Ohio State University.
I'm spending a lot of time in Detroit, so I get to hear that, the other side.
Oh, I'll bet.
Yeah.
Back to Jamestown baseball. I only have one story I don't think I ever told my brother. I was talking to Russ Dietrich a number of years ago, and Russ remembers our dad when he was treasurer, and Russ was a very, very young player. And he said, we always appreciated your dad because when we needed money, we would go see him, and somehow he found it.
Well, I remember reading by the way, I'm enjoying the book Tarp Skunks. It was an excellent book. I was thinking about Scott Kinberg when I was reading about Scott. It reminded me of his dad and uncle, who I knew fairly well. But yeah, that is just really excellent. That was just an excellent.
Well, speaking of excellent, this has been more than excellent. I thank you for sharing all of this. And personally, this has been a high hoot, you know, and that's a high thing for me to say. It's a high hoot. They put his category.
Well, I remember, Greg, when you and I used to bowl on Saturday mornings at the old Satellite Lanes
Oh my gosh.
with Sam Manella owned it then, and Jim and Marie Barone ran it, and B. Chandler was in charge of the junior bowling program.
Wow, that's bringing back some names. Jim Barone, who was a bat boy at the Jamestown Fall.
Yes, right. That's right. Jim Barone. Yeah.
42 or something like that.
Oh yeah. He
We
was.
interviewed Jim. By the way, that's on YouTube.
Oh, it is.
Yeah,
Well, I'll have to find it.
Yeah, it's well
I'll
worth
have to
it
find
because
it.
he talks about Johnny Newman and being in.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'll bet he does. I bet he's got more Johnny Newman stories than probably anybody.
He and Jack Gallagher.
Yeah. I remember going to Johnny's calling hours when he died. I was between my junior and senior year in college, and I came home and saw the paper that he died. And Dad said, why don't we go to the calling hours? So we went to the calling hours and talked to his wife, and that was really the only time that I ever met his wife.
Yeah.
Then.
Johnny's my manager at Collins. I mean, so Babe Ruth. We won the league championship that year. I was 13, and Ray Fasciano. Ray was on the team.
Yeah, yeah.
And he really was heavy. I mean, really heavy. And Jeff, little young Jeff, you know, he could carry the bags out of the back of the
Oh, I know.
bat bag out of the back of the cover. But he'd sit there at the bench. But he had us do all kinds of major league plays. You know, as a Babe Ruth that nobody knew.
Oh, I'm sure he knew a lot of that stuff. Oh, I know he did. I used to sit with him at games, and he would talk about strategy, and yeah, absolutely. That was a lot of fun those days. I remember they used to broadcast some Little League games on the radio. Jim Roselli used to broadcast the games, and he would sit up at Bergman Park. He'd sit right behind the screen. I remember when I was playing in a game that he broadcast, and I remember I got up to the plate and I could hear him. He said, "Now stepping to the plate is Dave Lundquist. He bats from the right side."
Yeah, I never knew that. That's interesting.
Oh, that is interesting. That is.
This is terrific. Thank you for taking up a
Sure.
lot of your time. But
No
this is
problem.
great. This is great.